Welcome to the Doggy Dojo. I'm your host, Susan Light, a Los Angeles-based dog trainer and behavior consultant on a quest to become worthy of the title Sensei of the Doggy Dojo. Before I get into today's episode, I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for tuning in. This is the last episode of Season 4. This is my 70th, 70 episode. I really love doing this podcast, and I want you to know no one connected to the show makes any money from it. None of the amazing guests get paid for sharing their time and expertise, and I do all this on my own time. And why do we all do it? I do it because I love dogs, and I love the people that love dogs, and I'm passionate about getting good information out to these pet parents. There's so much misinformation out there and so many unqualified experts, that's in air quotes, spewing outdated and damaging advice that, I donate this time just to attempt to counter all that noise that people have to sort through to get help with their dogs. My vision for this show is a free resource of the most up-to-date and humane advice you can get for your dog. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reviewing. That helps the show up in people's feeds and as suggestions for new people to listen. So if you listen but you haven't yet, please take a moment to rate or review the show. There's a reason I ask you to subscribe and share and review, and it's just to help me get the word out to more people. I'll be starting work on Season 5 right after the holidays. I hope you all have an amazing celebration and a fantastic new year. Okay, on to this week's episode. We're talking about board and train. What is a board and train? Should you send your dog away for training? Will you get a perfectly trained dog back at the end? And what should you look for when you're picking one out? We'll cover all this and more with a trainer who has done hundreds of board and trains at this point. She's been on the show before. She's a good friend, mentor, and a close colleague. Please welcome back multi-certified trainer and behavior consultant, Sylvia Wes. Welcome back to the podcast.
It's so good to be back.
I'm super excited to talk about board and trains because I think it's a hot topic in the dog training world right now.
The hottest.
I don't know about the hottest.
It's my hot button issue.
I mean, but this goes right into it because I do think it's wrapped up in what is probably the hottest topic, which is differences of methodologies, right? The
correct
force-free versus the compulsive, or however you want to label it. The labeling is troubling, but however you want to label it, because I think a lot of the force-free community has come out to say, don't ever send your dog to a board and train. Don't ever send them away to a trainer. And I think that's an overreaction to what it is, a lot of really scuzzy stuff happening to dogs. So let's break it down for people.
Yeah. I think can we start with my red flags?
Sure. Like red flags if you're looking for a board and train?
Yeah. Red flag languaging that scares me is boot camp.
Yeah.
If you see that, run away.
Yeah.
I would also say red flags are if you're looking through photos from other dogs that are there, if you notice them wearing bandanas or things like that, those will oftentimes be used to hide aversive equipment. They don't want you to know that they have your dog in a shock collar, so they put a bandana over it. Mm-hmm. That would be a red flag. Any program that says guarantee, red flag.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, because there's no guarantees, even in a board and train situation. So those would be those are the three things that I'm if you see these, steer clear. And then typically anything in a facility. Up. Yeah.
Let's back up because maybe some people, they're board and train. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, fair.
So let's go all the way back to your options for having your dog trained.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's a myriad of options. I mean, during the pandemic, you and I were on the forefront of some of the early days of day training options, which really didn't exist before then. And then there's, that's where you would take your dog somewhere, or a trainer would come to your house when you're not home and train your dog. Mm-hmm. Then more traditional training tends to vary into two camps. You've got private training. Those are your one-on-one sessions. A trainer is either coming to your home, or now you can do it virtually. Mm-hmm. I'm like totally aging how long I've been in the business, because I'm like, nowadays you could do,
There's
back in
this
my
thing
day,
called a computer.
back in my day, we didn't have virtuals.
But we didn't
we,
really.
no, it wasn't a thing. I remember when 2020, I was teaching a group class for puppies and the shutdown was coming. And I was like, no worries, you guys. We're going to pick this up next Saturday. I can't see you here at the store, but I'll see you online and I'll send you all a meeting link for a group class. And they were like, what? An online group class? And I was like, it'll work, I promise.
Yeah.
So if you're doing one-on-one privates virtually, or a trainer comes to your home and basically they walk you through how to train your dog, and then group classes, of course, that's, like you take your dog to a group class with other dogs and you guys are learning from a trainer together. Essentially, those are all modalities in which the trainer is training you to train your dog.
Except for the day training.
Except for day training, yeah, which it varies too from trainer to trainer. Like, I think a lot of us have the same names for a huge variance of types of service. So to me, I'll clarify that day training means I come to your home and work with your dog for a set number of time, or I pick your dog up and they come to my home or another location like a store or whatever, and I train your dog without the owner being present. That's how I would classify day training.
Yeah, because otherwise it would be a private session.
Yes,
when you're just showing up and the owner is there.
Exactly. So yeah. And then lastly is this idea of a board and train. So board and train is typically composed of two separate elements. The first is just boarding. So that's your dog eating, sleeping, living at the trainer's location. I did mention like one of my red flags is like facility geared board and trains, typically because we're seeing those animals kind of created for really long periods of time, like sometimes 12, 14 hours a day. They're being created and only taken out when they're being worked with. I think that I see that a lot for like the aggressive dog community, which always makes me really sad. But that's sort of how these trainers get away with taking these, aggressive dogs or dogs that are flooded just by being around other dogs and putting them in a situation where they can be boarded with training. So that's what board and train means, right? Boarded with training. Versus like what I do, which I classify really clearly, is an in-home humane board and train, where the dogs are living in my house with me and my husband and my pets. So they're integrated into our home life. We're snuggling on the couch. We're going for walks in my gated community where, they come to my parents' house with me and call my mom grandma. So, to me, like that's what a board and train looks like for me. And I think, what it really comes down to, and why I think it's detrimental to tell people steer clear of board and trains, is I have always said this, and sometimes it ruffles feathers, but I live in the real world with real people who need real solutions. There's a lot of stuff that happens in dog training that I feel is like idealized. It's like in the ideal world, this is what dog ownership and dog training would look like. And we don't live in the ideal world where we can just have everybody understanding the science of learning and changing their ideals completely and shifting their thinking completely. We're talking like core values, societal norms that have been integrated into how we have relationships with our pet dogs for 70 plus years. That's the world that I live in. So for me to say to a client like, oh, you should never board and train. Well, sometimes people get puppies and they have a vacation planned with their family and they weren't planning on getting a puppy, but the right dog came into their life and now they have this dog and they're going out of town. And what are they supposed to do with that dog? Just do boarding? Okay, fine. But if this is like a 5-month-old puppy, that's
Prime
integral.
time.
Yeah, that's like big time learning opportunities. So they're going through a fear period. They're having all these developmental things happening for them. We're probably right in the middle of potty training. At that point, it's a deficit to the client to have their dog just go stay at someone's home who isn't a dog trainer, who is underskilled. In the same token, it's traumatizing if they go into one of these like boot camp arenas where they're gonna, be thrown into a shock collar and into a crate for 16 hours a day, and then you're not gonna get back the same dog.
Well, that's why people are speaking out against board and trains. And I do want to say, like, I understand where that's coming from, because of the horror
100%.
stories that people have heard. So you have to use caution.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but weren't you and I can't remember if you were sitting with me when we were working at Fit Dog and that client came in and her puppy had the burn marks on her neck?
She had, the really young dog in the shock collar.
4-month-old.
For puppy preschool?
Yeah, no, just for regular day training, but it was like a 4-month-old doodle dog that she had sent for like a board and train boot camp and literally got her dog back with like burn marks on his neck from a shock collar.
Yeah. So, and I've had clients say they sent their dog away and didn't realize it, but they were starving their dog. That's another very common thing that they'll do. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about like the overcrating, I've seen videos of these quote unquote trainers being like, oh, they're crying in the crate and I'm just going to leave them there until they shut up. And it's like, they're like, it's been 10 hours, and it's like, wow, so there's a lot of assholes out there. You can swear, this is explicit. There's a lot of assholes and there's no other appropriate word for people who do that to dogs, and then charge their parents thousands of dollars for it.
Way too much money. Yeah. I also think it's really interesting. Like, I think the whole pricing model is really interesting. So the way I price my board and trains is they're actually equivalent to a private session with me, which
means they're getting boarding for free.
Right. You always made fun of me for doing that. You'd be like, wait, what? But I do that
because it feels like it should be more expensive. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but I want to make it attainable for people because for a lot of people, again, I live in the real world. Like, it's not optional. It's a necessity. Right? Like I have clients who travel all the time whose dogs I've done board and trains for since they were, 4 months old. And now the dog is 4 years old and they're at my house every other month for like a weekend away because now they're family. Like, they board with me too, right? Because I also offer regular boarding. So I feel like being able to provide a client with a safe space where their dog is protected and loved and that they can rely on into the future, that's ideal. I've had this argument with a trainer online, and basically their comeback was, well, they should just have a pet sitter stay at their house.
Those are hard to find, to be honest.
One, those are hard to find, and two, not all dogs are suited for that. Like, I have special needs dogs, you do too, that are not suited for just like a sitter to come and stay at the house for like a 12-hour overnight sit and then leave. Like, that dog is not built for that lifestyle. So I think like limiting options for real people who need real solutions. It's not that they want a board and train. I find that most of my clients, the majority of my clients, it's not that they're just like wanting to send their dog away because they don't want to do the work. It's like, no, this is a necessity. Like, they're traveling, they're going somewhere. They actually need care for their dog. And they're like, you know what? Care is so expensive. Good care is expensive.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep,
If you
should
are
be.
going to have a good, safe space for your dog, that's like limited number of dogs, right? It's like in someone's home, that's expensive. So
Yeah.
for most clients, they're like, you know what? I'm already going to be making the investment. I'd rather pay a bit more and have my dog trained at the same time. And now I've opened this door and opened this opportunity to now my dog can stay with my dog trainer who I trust, who is humane, who is using, R positive. And I know that anytime I need to go on a trip now, there's someplace safe for my dog to be where they're going to continue growing and learning.
Yeah.
I don't see the downside to that.
I don't either. But I don't think there are too many people using our business model. So like I think it's hard to find. First of all,
Well,
it's
and
hard to find people to do boarding in a home instead of a facility, which is just so much better for your dog. It's less stressful. And I think about these dogs that, like you, have been coming to my house for years now. And it's like a second home. And some of the parents joke, they're like, they're not even sorry I'm leaving. They're just so excited to run into your house.
Exactly.
Because it's their second home at this point. They've spent so much time here and they know it and they know
literally
me.
know when they pull in the gate. They know exactly where they are.
They're like, we're at Auntie's house. So,
yeah.
To have that. And yes, some of them have done board and trains. Some of them are just boarding. Some of them, back and forth, kind of whatever they need. But yeah, I think people are sort of negating the value of having that for your dog. They're only looking at the shock jocks because the people who really pour a lot of money into advertising board and train programs, they're trying to sell. So notice the difference in what you're saying, which, hey, I'm going to be a safe space for you. I know you're going away. I need to care for your dog. I can also train him in this humane way. I would train him even if you were here with me. Also, let's remind me, we need to talk about like follow-up for like
and
maintaining skills, right? So we'll come back to that. But like what you're seeing advertised to you is your dog's barking. I'll fix it. Give him to me for 2 weeks. Your dog's pulling on the leash. I'll fix it. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's how they're selling themselves. And that's why they use the aversive equipment. And that's why they say, I guarantee they'll be fixes, because they're going to spend 2 weeks beating the spirit out of your dog until they just sit there afraid to move because they're afraid of being hurt, shut down. I mean, that's the dog. I mean, how many times you and I have had to come in and try to repair the damage done by some of these trainers.
And it's not just to the dogs. Like the damage is also done to the client. Like their ability to have a working relationship with the trainer gets damaged at that point too, right? Because
no one knows they're signing up for that. If you willingly send your dog into that environment, I'd be shocked. They're not telling you that's what's going to happen, usually.
Correct. Yeah. Or they sell you on, it's just a communication technique. Right. And, 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, there's literally no reason to use force to communicate with your dog. Yeah, right? There's 100%. Like the super duper 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 rare case. And I'm just saying that it's out there.
Like an emergency situation.
Listen, in the 10 years that I've been training, I have yet to come across a case. And for the last 3 years, I've specialized in aggression and reactivity. And I don't think I've ever reached a point in a case where I'm like, better bust out the educator. That's what the stim collars are called. And
the cute names to hide what they do.
think, but then at the same time, like there are super force-free trainers out there that would probably look at like the fact that I use gentle leaders and halties and say that I'm not totally force-free. But again, I live in the real world, and I've had clients whose like wrists and hips are broken and dislocated because their giant 50-pound dog, this is a true story, pulls them into the street and they black out because they knock their head into the cement and almost get hit by a car. I can't tell that elderly woman, let's take 8 months to train your dog how to walk on a leash because she lives in an apartment in Beverly Hills. Her dog needs to go out to pee and we have a safety issue, right? So there's always those real world situations that really do call for creative thinking and problem solving. So yeah, but I mean, in a board and train situation, I think again, this goes back to my red flag, Susan. It's like guarantees. There are no guarantees. One of the first things I tell my clients when they're interested in a board and train is I say, well, this is what I'm going to do with your dog. We're going to take field trips. I like to take them into real world training. I like to proof their basics. We're living in a home environment. So we are going to work on like house manners and like just general. And by house manners, you guys, I literally mean like the ability to self-soothe and self-regulate at a home where there are other dogs present. Like we can't just wrestle 24/7. We have to learn how to sleep. We have to learn how to relax, right? That's house manners. When everyone thinks of a well-mannered dog in a home, they don't really know what they're talking about. It's not a dog that goes to their bed and stays there endlessly. It's a dog that chooses calm. It's a dog that chooses to regulate, that chews on appropriate things, that's not eating the furniture because they're picking a bone out of the toy basket, right? Like, I also think that people don't really understand what they are looking for when they say, I want a really well-trained dog. That means something different to everybody. So I think I always take it upon myself to like educate a client in what does a really well-trained dog look like to you? Is it a dog that can go with you anywhere and sit on a patio and have lunch? We can aim for that, but there's no guarantee that that's your dog. They may really hate public spaces, but that's an education moment, right? So if you're a trainer who's like avidly against board and train, my question would be like, let's take back the power and put it in your own hands and say, well, what would it look like if I did a board and train, and how would I educate a client? Because that's what I did when I created my business model. Is I said, this is a very broken business model. Why do people keep doing it? Well, because when it all shakes out, this is a need that the public has, period. I can shout it from the top of the rooftops. We both can, and everybody can, how horrible it is in some of these conditions. Or I can take contrary action and build the better program, right?
Yeah.
And educate the clients and let them know, like, okay, first of all, there's no guarantees. I'm going to try all this stuff with you. I don't know if any of it's going to stick. I'll be honest. I don't know what your learner is going to do in the environment. Here's the feedback that I get. You can look at the reviews. Like, you can look at my client testimonials. Like, this is usually what it looks like after a board and train, but I don't know that that's going to be your dog. I can't promise that for you. Right.
Right.
Also, I think a 2-week timeline is a waste of everybody's time and money. It's absolutely not enough time. And over the years of doing board and trains, and probably at this point, hundreds of dogs have lived in my house. Usually right at the end of 2 weeks is when we actually start to see a little bit of a regression as the dog starts to settle in and more of their personality starts to come out in your home environment. So 2 weeks, kind of a waste of time. So anybody out there who's telling you like 2 weeks, I guarantee I can fix your dog, it's not even close. Like, it's not enough time to habituate new things. The thing I always tell my clients is it takes 3 weeks for you as a human to build a new habit, right? Consistently doing the same thing over and over again for 3 weeks is what patterns in new behavioral choice. So to think that in just a short 2 weeks, you're going to have a laundry list of things accomplished for your dogs, it's not realistic. So I think also for the client, if you're somebody out there who's looking for a board and train, the more realistic you can be about what you need out of the program, that's going to help you see the results you want to see. If you're like, I need them to learn 10 cues and be able to not dash out the door and stop jumping on furniture and sleep in a crate and your laundry list is 20 items long, that's not going to happen. In 2 weeks, realistically, we're going to accomplish one goal. 3 weeks, we can usually get to about 3 goals.
When you're talking about like changing behaviors, taking time to build habits, behavior is really dependent on circumstance and environment as well. So I think it's important for them to know, like, you're building this skill in your environment. and it's as close, to their environment as you can make it, because it is a home, it's not a facility.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain things that they will need to do to maintain these behaviors and let their dog realize, oh, this is true here too, at home, just like it was at Auntie Sylvia's. So it's like if you're like, let's just use an example. I don't want my dog on the furniture anymore. Teach them, not to sleep in a crate so they don't sleep in bed with me, and to not be on the couch. And it's like, okay, a big part of that's going to be like place station training with a nice, comfortable bed in the living room for them to choose instead of the couch. But you go home and you don't put that comfortable bed on the floor for that dog, they're going to pick the couch. Why?
Yeah.
Because there's no comfortable place for them to sit. And we've taught them to pick this comfortable place. So, there are things that you're going to need to do to maintain the dog's behavior. You might have to make some changes to your environment like that. And so,
potty training is a big one.
Oh, yeah. It's really important for people, because I think that's another way that they sell these really awful board and trains. It's like, I'm going to fix them. I'm going to give you your dog back, quote unquote, fixed,
and can we just hold on? Yeah. Can we actually add to my red flags the word fix your dog?
Yeah. Because they're not broken.
I hate that word. There's nothing wrong with your dog's behavior. So whenever I'm phrasing things with my clients too, is like, I avoid the word fix. There's nothing to be fixed.
Right.
We're looking for like idealized behavior, right? So whenever a client says, well, I just need you to fix their leash walking, I'll gently correct them by saying, okay, so you want me to help them make better choices on leash. Is that what I'm hearing? Right? Because there's nothing broken about the way they're walking on leash. They have a historical learning pattern that tells them this is how this apparatus works. We just want to help your dog make better choices, but better choice making comes from consistency. It comes from new behavioral learning patterns that are replacing historical learning patterns that already work. So oftentimes that's why board and trains work so great. It's almost like complete management, because we're taking the dog completely out of their environment where the history of learning has happened. So oftentimes I'll tell my clients, I probably won't even see the behavior that you're having an issue with for the first week and a half, because they'll be so busy trying to acclimate to my new environment that they won't have time to do the thing, because they're going to just be trying to figure out what it is. And then maybe I'll start to see some of the alarm barking, right? And you've seen that too, where we're like, I don't understand, this dog doesn't bark at all. And then after like a week or two in, you're like, there's the alarm barking. And then we can start working on the redirection. So really keeping that in mind. But I threw potty training out there earlier. I think that's one of the biggest things I get a call on, especially for puppies. And there's no way for me to take a dog into my house and potty train them for you, because it's one of those things that's very localized. So once they go back home, if they have a favorite rug that they're peeing on in your house, it doesn't matter if they didn't pee in my house a single time in 3 weeks. If they go home and you don't upkeep and maintain the schedule that I developed for your dog that helped them be successful, right? Like consistently taking them out so that they had predictability in when they were able to alleviate themselves. So the panic of not knowing when they were going to alleviate themselves never got to set in. So they weren't desperate to find somewhere to alleviate themselves in the house. Like if you're not maintaining that, they're going to go back to peeing on their favorite spot on the rug, because there's a safety in that habit for them. So maintenance is the better part of the game. I send my clients what's called a go home letter, which is a really, really long email. And I don't know if they all read it. If you're listening to this and you have read your entire go home letter, please don't be insulted by my comments. But in the letter, I tell them that, good dog training is 90% owner, 10% trainer.
Yeah.
So, right, because 3 weeks out of the entirety of your dog's scope of life, even, sometimes I have dogs that come for 4 to 6 weeks. That's a blip in the timeline when we're talking about some behaviors that have learning histories years old. right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, we're out of time.
That went quick.
Goes so fast. But let's like soundbite, chunk it, recap it for people, right? So like board and train, pros and cons. If you're interested in doing a board and train, you need to be really careful about who you pick, because all the hate being spewed at them is semi-justified. It's, against the kinds of board and trains that you definitely want to avoid. So let's assume if you're looking for a board and train, let's talk about some of those red flags. Let's hit those again, and things to look for and things to ask to know the difference.
Yes. So I would say red flags, anybody that says guarantee, anybody that calls it boot camp, and anybody that doesn't have transparency. Things that I always ask, and you can find these on my FAQs page on my website, but I think you should ask any trainer, especially one that you want your dog to live with. What are your credentials? What is your training philosophy? What will you do if my dog does something wrong? What will you do when my dog does something right? You need to know those transparently. Because if they say, I'm going to shock them or I'm going to use punishment, burp, next.
Right. Yep. And then pros and cons just in general as a thing, because I do think situationally it makes a ton of sense for people. I think you mentioned having a puppy and then a trip coming up, or a previously planned trip and then getting a puppy. But I think also having a baby is a huge time people reach out, because bringing a baby home is so exhausting that just having somebody to help you with your dog, and then also getting some good skills in for this transition. It's a really popular time to do it.
Maybe you need your dog to know how to, Mr. Larry, for instance, right, needs to know how to be behind a baby gate. Needs to know how to be stationed. Right? So those are skills that you might need if you're having a baby. I would say other pros are any person who's struggling with their dog in adolescence. It's a tough time, and you don't have to do it alone. That's what I always tell my clients. It's like, if you're really struggling with your dog and you're tired of them and you're resentful, might be a good time to tap out and find someone who's going to humanely handle your dog through this time, who understands what's happening to them developmentally. Because you're going to get so much more out of it if someone can guide you on how to get that dog's needs met in a way that makes it sustainable.
Which is what a lot of that quote unquote unwanted behavior is, right? It's them attempting to meet their needs, they're attempting to meet their needs. We just don't tend to like the way it shows up.
Yeah. And I always tell my clients, give yourself permission to need a break. I took a break from my dog. I sent her to a board and train with my really dear friend at Updog LA when she was a puppy, because I needed a break. Even me as a professional with all the skills and support that I have, I was like, raising a puppy is hard, and it's okay to give yourself permission to say, like, this isn't going well. I am not having a relationship that I'm enjoying with my dog. I need a breather so that I can come back to this with fresh eyes and compassion and sweetness and understanding and kindness, right? Because teenagers are tough.
Yeah. And I think people are surprised by adolescence. I know that, like, before I became a trainer, it never occurred to me. It's like puppy, adult. But, there's adolescence just like we have. So it can be rough. Well, thank you so much. We are way out of time, but thank you for coming on again. Always lovely to talk to you.
You too.
Thank you for stopping by the dojo to learn with me this week. This is your aspiring sensei, Susan Light, signing off. If you're interested in working with me, you can find me at www.doggydojopodcast.com, or I'm Susan Light LA on Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook. The music was written by Mac Light. You can find him at www.maclightsongwriter.com. If you like the show, please support it by subscribing, sharing it with your friends, rating it, and reviewing on Apple Podcasts. Just a reminder, this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and does not constitute advice or professional services by either the host or any of the guests. I'll be back in 2025 with a brand new season of the Doggy Dojo.